is U.S. history, and tonight I want to talk to you about learning design in my classroom, learner, meaning student, outcomes or expectations, and my teaching environment. And as was mentioned in my little avatar summary there, here's the deal. Your student in U.S. history is going to have to take a state-mandated test at the end of this class. It's one of 5 tests that students in Texas take in order to graduate from high school. Okay, so throughout the year we'll be we'll be looking at concepts that may be on that test. Okay, some of the stuff they learned actually in 8th grade U.S. history, and we're right now, the last few weeks and for the next week or two, we're going to be doing some review activities for things that they learned that was Civil War, pre-Civil War, important U.S. history concepts such as Constitution, Bill of Rights, amendments, things like that. But what I want you to know is that as we go through the content, we will be looking at the content using different digital tools, okay? And your student will be, from time to time, taking paper tests. They may be doing a paper activity that looks like a summary of a textbook chapter. That's what it is, okay? Old school. They will be given topics, sometimes for themselves, sometimes in groups of 2, sometimes in groups larger, where once we've learned a topic, we'll break up in groups and break the key ideas from that moment in history up, and they will go do research. I'll give them different digital resources to put together presentations to present to each other in class, key topics in U.S. history. Okay, so when you hear 21st century resources, cloud-based lesson activities, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, they have iPads. I have a cart of MacBooks back there. I've got 15 MacBooks in this classroom, so we'll be leveraging those tools in addition to paper-type resources. Okay, I think it's important that our students are able to do both, right? And that's the environment, the learning design in my classroom. As far as my expectations for your learners, there'll be pretty much 2 types of assignments that they'll be graded on. One would be a formative assessment, which means more like what in old school would be quizzes and homework, okay? But sometimes that'll look like a digital activity. And sometimes it'll look like quizzes and homework, okay? Then there will be, those are in a 25 percentile grade-wise. Okay, so they don't have the impact of the other activities. The 75 percentile activities are more like what you would call tests in the way I learned at school. Okay, we had homework and major tests. So we'll have, in that category, we'll have tests, sometimes paper tests, sometimes we'll have digital assessments and larger projects, okay, that have more weight and depth, okay? And so that's the outcomes or the things that are graded that your student will be turning in will fall into either of those 2 categories. We've already hit both those categories. We're finishing up the first mini projects, which are 2-day projects. We're presenting those right now in this class, and they'll get a test grade for that. Grades look pretty good. I don't have them posted yet, but they're looking pretty good. And then finally is the environment, is what the administration has asked me to talk about, the environment in my classroom. And the way I'm going to address that is through engagement. It's no surprise to you, you've got learners in the high school age group that history is not the biggest thing on their mind. They have lots of other things way in front of history that are on their mind, whether it's gaming or UIL sports or girls and boys stuff or whatever. But one way that I get students to engage history is at times we'll stop and we'll look at a moment in history through the lens of an interest that they have, usually a career interest. For example, last year when we were doing a review on Civil War in my U.S. history class, we looked at the Civil War through several lenses. We looked at the Civil War through the lens of technology. We looked at the Civil War through the lens of media. You would be amazed to know the impact that the invention of the camera had on the outcome of the Civil War. Okay, media was exploding as a technology as the Civil War was happening. We looked at the Civil War through the lens of medical technology. You would be amazed to know how many injuries were attributed to a type of bullet that was invented a few years before the Civil War, the mini ball. That didn't just break bones where the bullet went through, but would break bones way above and below that. And they didn't have anesthesia, they didn't have antiseptic in those days. They didn't understand that technology, and a lot of people died of infection, different types of infection. And then they would just get sick. But anyway, but the students, my point is, we're studying Civil War. I want them to learn Civil War concepts, and I'm able to engage them by having them look at it through a lens that interests them. I've been doing this for about 3 years here at Coppell, and I've actually got had very good success with getting kids interested in history subjects by using those lenses. We'll be adding some lenses this year, depending on student interest. So another thing I try to do in my classes is I try to have the students look at the value. I'm often asking them to find the value. It's like we study something, it's like, let's take a look, can we find any value in this event or this idea in history, okay? We've been talking lately about the amendments, and we talked about the abolition of slavery in the United States. We've had some pretty amazing discussions about why the United States had to continue to change our Constitution over many, many years and still have a civil rights program 100 years later to right the travesty of that peculiar institution that we had in slavery for over 100 years. And so what I'm saying is the students are engaging that because they're interested. They're interested in talking about what was that really like. You know, why didn't the 13th Amendment just end all of that difficulty? It was like only the beginning of ending the difficulty, right? And so anyway, so I will be finding ways to engage your students, sometimes through the lens of their career interest, sometimes through more current events. Okay, because really that's tied to current events. Anyway, thank you.